I want to talk about what's in the funds, because you and I used to have this argument all the time about why these funds look this way, because they mimic large cap and large cap growth funds a lot here. So the biggest holding in the climate action ETF that you run, here they are, folks: NVIDIA, Amazon, Microsoft, Alphabet, Apple, and Meta. This is what we call the Magnificent Seven, by the way, but here it is. And it's really the same with the S&P 500 ESG ETF. This is USCA. This is the climate action. But if you look at the other one, the S&P, you know, it's essentially the same thing. How do these stocks? People ask me this all the time. How is it that these big cap tech names suddenly make it in an ESG fund? Is there nothing else that's out there? Can you just explain the criteria for?
Yeah, absolutely, with pleasure. It's relatively straightforward because both S&P as well as USCA aim to invest in those stocks that are the best within their respective industry groups. So the idea isn't to be super concentrated and only select a handful of stocks that do the best from an ESG or from a climate principle, but still have a portfolio that largely resembles the economic makeup of the US economy, largely resembles the weights of each industry group within the benchmark index. And so, you know, there's sometimes a misperception that ESG funds cannot invest in energy companies. That's absolutely wrong.
No.
Energy is a vital component of our economy, naturally. You know, every light that glows needs to be powered. And so the ESG funds that resonate the most in our experience are the ones that acknowledge economic realities of production of necessity, and at the same time invest in those companies that do relatively well compared to the rest of their peers.
So the point here is try to answer the simple question: why are tech and communication services? Because these are reflective of the industries, right?
Yes.
So if 27% of the S&P is technology stocks, 27% of an ESG fund is going to be in technology. Am I correct?
That's roughly correct, yes.
So the reason that you see, I'm just trying to lead you here to answer the question, why are we just seeing so many tech stocks? Is, well, that's the way it is. There are energy stocks that are in the ESG ETFs, right? Conoco shows up all the time in these.
Absolutely.
They're just further down because their market cap is smaller. Is it the answer as simple as that?
It really is. And even if you go to a fund that doesn't have those kinds of guardrails, which I think are actually very smart for most investors to stay broadly invested in the global economy. Even if you didn't want to do that and you go to a pure sort of leaders type strategy, of which those products exist, those funds end up tending to be even more heavily invested in tech because, frankly, tech is one of the cleaner industries in the world. Right? It's certainly cleaner than most major heavy industry. It's cleaner than most energy and extraction industries. So yeah, if you solely look at climate as your window, you'll probably not end up owning a lot of energy companies, not owning a lot of miners, not owning a lot of steel companies. Yeah. And so you end up with something that looks like services, healthcare, and technology, which is a very strong bet to take. Right. So you should be doing that with very wide open eyes.
And it's ESG, right? So there's three components here. Are they weighted equally, E, S, and G, when you break these down? How do those three components could have come in here?
Yeah, for standard ESG funds, it's a little bit difficult to say it's fully equally weighted, but they're equally important in a standard ESG fund. On something like USCA.
So you run a screen for, like, let's just put governance, diversity in the boardroom. Is that a factor that's considered when you screen it? There's a score assigned? I mean, it's quantitative, right?
It's purely quantitative where, let's say, under the environmental category, there's a number of factors, under the social category, a number of factors, and governance, a number of factors as well. Then they get aggregated into one broad ESG score.
Okay, so how do we push this ESG story forward? It's like electric vehicles. Right now, it's in a hole, right? Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to talk about this right now. So it seems like, I said this before, most people are in favor of clean energy. Most people are in favor of diversity in the boardroom. How do you re-propose this idea?
I think what we'll see is that this will become a quiet story that a lot of people buy. And what I mean by that is, if you talk to financial advisors, almost every advisor I know has an ESG strategy for clients who come in and want that. The question is, are they being responsive or are they being proactive in recommending an ESG strategy out of the gate? I would say back in the hype cycle when it was the hot news in 2018, there were a lot of advisors who made the pivot towards actually learning a lot about ESG and starting to build their practices around that. Those folks pulled back. They probably aren't coming back. The demand from individuals, however, never really waned. What went away was the hot money of people thinking this was going to be a momentum kind of play. It's not a momentum play. This is a long-term way of approaching your allocation.
ESG funds did have their moment. Remember 2018, 2019, we were doing
it was like
this
smart
all
beta
the time.
in 2010.
Yes, yeah. Or even pot ETFs or crypto. I mean, this is the beauty of the ETF business. It picks up on whatever was hot.
Picks up everything.
And that was hot now.
Right.
Anything else, Arnie?
The only thought I want to share is actually the topic of climate emissions actually has applications beyond pure ESG strategies. So, for example, 2 weeks ago we launched our first active ETF. It's a global natural resource ETF. It's not an ESG strategy, yet the manager pays close attention to carbon emissions, makes predictions in terms of what
What's the symbol
makes,
for that?
NRES, N-R-E-S, natural resources. Very interesting fund from my perspective, not an ESG fund, yet the topic of carbon emissions super important.